John Sturgeon is what most of us would consider a real Alaskan. John started hunting moose on the Yukon River below Eagle, Alaska in 1971. He has hunted this area consecutively since that time. That's 45 years. These rivers are normally rock-infested with one shallow riffle after the next. That makes the use of a jet boat difficult, if not impractical. About 25 years ago, John purchased a small hovercraft to run the Yukon's tributaries. In 2007, while repairing his hovercraft during his annual moose hunt, he was approached by 3 uniformed National Park Service cops. At first, they seemed very cordial and asked a lot of questions about the hovercraft. Then the tone changed radically. One of the park rangers pulled out a rule book and read a section that said hovercrafts were not allowed within national park preserves. They said if John drove his hovercraft out of the area, he would be cited. When asked how he was supposed to get it out of the preserve, they said that was his problem, not an answer you might expect from a real Alaskan. Sturgeon knew that the Yukon and many of its tributaries were navigable waters, as defined under both state and federal law. That means they were owned by the state of Alaska from the ordinary high water mark on one bank to the ordinary high water mark on the other bank, and all the submerged lands under the water. The feds didn't dispute that, but said they had a level of authority over the state. The fact that the state owns all navigable waters is really important, since it means that all the gravel bars in a big river like the Yukon are owned by the state, even if the uplands were owned by the feds. Unfortunately, the feds picked on the wrong guy this time. John did some more checking and found out that when ANILCA was passed, there were some very special provisions added to protect Alaska's lifestyle. Alaska senators and our lone representative wanted to make sure that the Fed regulations would not apply to state and private inholdings. Armed with this knowledge, John filed suit against the feds. The case moved through lower courts and is now scheduled to be heard by the U.S. Supreme Court in January. Sturgeon's lawsuit is all about the important section of ANILCA that is supposed to protect Alaskans from federal overreach. That section assured hunters and fishermen that they would be able to use Alaska's many rivers, lakes, and even tideland to hunt and fish. They would be able to use them to access their favorite hunting and fishing spots without being harassed by the feds. To be clear, Sturgeon's lawsuit is much more than a moose hunter being able to use his hovercraft. It's all about federal overreach. It's all about the federal government keeping the promises they made in ANILCA. It's also about being able to access our favorite hunting or fishing spot. It's also about managing our fish and game resources. Just recently, the feds overruled the ADF&G and promulgated regulations of their own on wolf and bear hunting. The ADF&G objected, but like always, the feds ignored them. Sturgeon's lawsuit is what we have been waiting for. It is a chance to tell the feds that they have to obey their own laws, not just the ones they like. It will also tell them once and for all they can't interpret laws any way they want. Sturgeon lost his lawsuit in the lower courts. Against all odds and what many folks may have considered common sense, he appealed his case to the U.S. Supreme Court. Like I said, the feds picked on the wrong guy this time. The Supreme Court had over 2,000 appeals for its first term for 2016. Sturgeon's case was one of 13 they decided to hear. This is the first ANILCA case to make it to the Supreme Court. You can bet they didn't decide to hear his case because they thought the lower courts had a brilliant opinion. Combine that with the fact that the Ninth Circuit is overturned by the Supreme Court 80 to 90% of the time. There is room for optimism that we will put the feds in their place once and for all. This is a really, really big deal. The time for all this to happen is very short. Sturgeon was notified on October 1st that his case was going to be heard and oral arguments are scheduled for mid-January. That's lightning speed for the court system. As they say, justice is neither swift nor inexpensive. It is going to cost Sturgeon a small fortune to take his case to the Supreme Court. A Washington, D.C. attorney runs from $700 to $1,500 per hour. You better have the best legal team available. Think of it this way. If you're going to have brain surgery, you don't want to look for the cheapest surgeon. You can help by donating to the cause. This is a chance for all of us to tell the feds we're mad as hell. We're not going to take it anymore.